Friday.
We're back!
Indeed we are.
It's been almost a year, I think, since our last video. And since then, we've just been moving on with our lives.
Social distancing from the organization.
Mental distancing from the organization, which is fine. And we're glad that we made that choice. And as many of you, most of you, probably everybody watching, will be affected in some way by the coronavirus. And we're homebound right now, as are millions of other people.
Yeah. And so why not use this opportunity to, we figured reach back out to the YouTube audience and say hello, just in case people were curious whatever happened to us. And it's encouraging to see there's a lot more people making videos now too, and I feel like this sequestering is gonna maybe get some people sitting around with nothing else to do looking at YouTube, and maybe they'll find a lot of these videos.
Yeah.
There's so many more out now.
Yeah, we saw that our dear friend Susan Gaskin just put up a video as well.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Susan. And she and I sort of came to the same conclusion at the same time in our life, that we just wanted to move on and move on with the healing of, emotional healing, physical healing. And but like Mike was saying, that many people now they're not going to be going to their meetings or out in field service.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the only options they're going to be left with is JW broadcasting, any live streaming they might have of talks, meetings, and
a lot of just surfing Facebook and YouTube and stuff, probably in downtime. Everybody's going to have downtime now. A lot of Netflix, but aside from that, I think people will just be spending time on social media. And
yeah, and for us, we've talked about this with other people who have woken up recently, that there's nothing you can say in a conversation with someone who's fully indoctrinated and believes in the organization. So the only thing you can do is, if you might make good points to them or bring up facts that they don't know about. But if they believe in it, the cognitive dissonance, they're going to just shut that out of their mind. They're going to shut it down. But if something happens in their life that they have their own personal Armageddon, as we say,
mm-hmm.
then they'll always remember what you said. And because they'll remember what you said, that might cause them to either reach back out to you, or they'll start doing their own research, and it'll be like, oh, that's why they said that. That's what they meant by that. And they'll start putting the pieces of the puzzle together themselves.
Yeah, I think that's, again, something we've been talking about lately, is that I just wish there was a way that you could wake people up just by talking to them, just by being logical and presenting a good argument, and but it's just not possible. Mm-hmm. And it's a little frustrating when you can clearly see that people they're hurting themselves. They're living a more stressed out life because of all of the regulations, so to speak, that's placed on them, and you see people giving up opportunities, and it's just disappointing. You want people to be able to break free, and you can give them all the evidence in the world, but they have to agree to look at it and to read it and to assess it honestly. And with real evidence, there is no, my way of looking at it and your way of looking at it. Evidence is provable, and we have that on our side. And it's just, it gets a little frustrating, but like Robin was saying, you have to accept the fact that at some point, everyone will kind of face a situation where they have to make that decision. Right now is I think a key time. Because when people are trapped at home, in some states, mandatory quarantine, we can't go out. So it's like you kind of are just sitting around on YouTube and on Facebook, maybe chatting with friends. All it takes is one person to forward a video to a friend to start a chain reaction, there, and somebody actually willing to, maybe after a few weeks of not going to meetings and service, maybe break some of those habits, get out of that routine a little bit, allowing yourself to think about things.
Yeah.
And when you're not constantly pressured, like at the meetings, to conform back to a certain type of mold or a certain type of thought process, when you can kind of think for yourself and kind of start forgetting what that mold feels like, then that allows people to maybe do a little investigation. I know with us, it took some time, but for me anyway, that's how it started. Just little bit by little things I learned by accident led to me looking into other things, and next thing you know, you find out the truth about the truth, and I'm out.
Yeah. And it really, like he said, takes getting out of that regular feeding of indoctrination that continues to confirm your biases, which is why they call it confirmation bias. But getting out of that habit of just going and vegging out and getting the indoctrination continually fed into your brain gives people a chance to start doing some critical thinking, allowing that to their natural brain process to start taking over again. And like so many people that we know that are in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community, including the John Cedars channel, Boyd Evans, when he got out of going to an English-speaking congregation and was in Ukrainian congregation? Either way, he's in a different language, and that woke him up. And we've heard that with other people that have gone to other, foreign language congregations. So, obviously the coronavirus is not a good thing, but in this sense, it might be something that wakes a lot of people up during this time.
Yeah, and the other thing, and this is something I think about on the weekends when I don't have to get up early and do something. That's my choice, by the way, not feel obligated. But like this coming weekend, if there's a Jehovah's Witness watching this who's used to getting up, and maybe Saturday you go out in field service, maybe Sunday is your public talk and Watchtower study and stuff, so you don't have a day that you can sleep in and drink coffee, read the paper or watch the news or just whatever it is that you like to do. So this coming weekend, take the time to do that. Turn off your cell phone the night before. Wake up when you want to wake up. Make yourself coffee or tea or just whatever you want to do. And spend as long doing that as you want to. If that means you're in your pajamas still at 6 p.m., so be it. Because that's how the rest of the world works. People do what they want. And it's something that, as a Jehovah's Witness, you are not used to doing, because there's always some outside pressure applied, whether it's what your family would think if you just didn't go out in service for a whole month, or you don't want to disappoint people in the congregation, or maybe there's a brother needed to lead the group and you're the only real option, so you feel obligated to go lead the group. There's a lot of pressures that come with that lifestyle. So when you're free of those pressures, enjoy it and just realize that this is how the rest of the world lives. And it's something that we never knew, and it's something that I still every single day at some point, I'm glad that I'm not a Jehovah's Witness. And it's not just because of, I didn't like going to meetings, but I realize that it's not true. So it's doing all of that for a belief system that's not true. And to benefit a human organization, and ultimately to benefit men. So to all of the good intentions of wanting to do the right thing spiritually and in service of God, when you realize that you're just serving men, makes it a lot easier to step off.
Mm-hmm. So we really haven't been keeping up with JW Broadcasting too much or anything that's going on with Jehovah's Witnesses. I do still watch a couple of ex-Jehovah's Witness channels, and they keep me apprised of anything I would need to know about, including what's happening with ICSA, although now it's on hold, and that's it's over in England, and that's the investigation into institutional handling of child abuse cases. And they had their day one of the hearings, and I found it very interesting because this focuses on some smaller religions. The first part of ICSA was on bigger religions and organizations, and now because of the sort of outcry in other organizations, and especially ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and current Jehovah's Witnesses, who wanted that this organization be included in their investigation. So found it very interesting that all other organizations, for the most part, without exception, began their opening statements by apologizing to their congregants, to their adherents of any pain that was caused because of how they mishandled and what their policies were that were, ripe for these types of things to happen in their organization. But it's so interesting that you will never hear an apology from the Jehovah's Witnesses.
No, they just refuse to accept any responsibility.
And it's, it's not what they're saying as much as what we know is the culture. So what they're saying as far as what their policies are and all of these things, it's not necessarily what they're saying, it's what they're not saying. And what we already know is the culture within the organization, which makes what they're saying actually lies.
I think that's the hardest part too, is that the Jehovah's Witness organization is such an insular organization that what you can read about the organization on jw.org, and by the way things are written, technically that could all be true, but there's another level to that. Like once you're in the organization, there are implied rules, and you see that by, just for example, like let's just say there's a disfellowshipping announcement at your Kingdom Hall, and there's all this speculation on what the person who was disfellowshipped did, because very often some people know the truth about it because that stuff always seems to get out. So there's a lot of people talking about why this person may have been disfellowshipped, and then it makes you feel like, oh, there's real consequences, real punishments for these things. So you're living in this insular culture where you know the rules and you've seen the consequences, and those things are hidden from the general public.
Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see what comes from that once they're able to resume the hearings. And there was something else that just recently I heard on the March JW Broadcasting that just confused the heck out of me. So we're going to play some, whatever clips. We haven't decided exactly what clips we're going to play yet, but we want to comment on what is said and see if it makes sense. Does it make sense?
Let's find out.
Okay.
And this is at 108. Okay.
You have everything you need. A map, a car, and plenty of fuel.
Snacks?
Before you start, you need to know your destination.
He needs a lot of snacks.
If you don't know where you're trying to go, you won't know which road to take.
if you don't know where you're trying to go, why did you get in the car and start driving?
I don't know, sometimes I drive aimlessly.
The same is true of our ministry, which is, in a sense, like that road trip. As Acts 13:48 shows, we're always searching for those who are rightly disposed for everlasting life. We have everything we need for the journey, including all the tools in our teaching toolbox. But what would you say is our destination? What's the most important goal that we're trying to accomplish in our ministry?
They don't even know themselves.
Is it placing literature? Directing people to jw.org? Making return visits? Starting Bible studies? Educating people about the Bible? Or making disciples of Christ Jesus and baptizing them?
I mean, do you want to talk about that at all? How every one of those points have been like a major point in the organization at some
Well,
point.
I mean, it has always been making disciples is the primary focus.
Each of those goals has value, but which one is our primary goal? What's the destination that we want to reach? Jesus identified it at Matthew chapter 28 and verses 19 and 20. There he said, "Go therefore and make disciples of people of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all the things I have commanded."
I really wanted to play the
Our destination
That's what I'm
is
talking
a
about. Well,
baptized disciple.
9 minutes?
Yeah.
Each person we meet, each piece of literature that we place.
I mean, there is that one part
in
about
becoming
the
baptized
and how
disciples.
like the kid seems so irritated at the old man and is like,
Oh, we can go over that
did
too.
you watch that?
Yeah, I've watched this whole
Okay,
thing.
let's watch. You passed it.
I thought it was at the end.
No, it's like right there. Here we go.
Of a baptized disciple fixed firmly in mind, we could end up stuck on side roads. For example, watch this video and see if you can identify the problem that our brother has.
The problem.
You going out in field service after lunch? Yes, I'm gonna be there, but I've got one return visit that I gotta make. All right, see you later.
Give him my credit card in there.
My neighbor lost his job after 20 years. And as a result, he's got to move out of his house, got to move into an apartment. But I decided to go help him out a little bit to pack up, make it a little easier for him to make that move.
You know, won't it be nice a time period where we don't have to worry about economic troubles like that?
Yeah, it will. You know, that's why I'm so happy that my grandchildren chose to go for higher education.
So, from the time we meet an interested person, we want to have our eyes on that goal of making a baptized disciple. In fact, the November 1977 Kingdom Ministry made this statement regarding those we study with. Our discussions should reflect a genuine personal interest in the student as a potential disciple, and therefore a potential brother or sister in the faith. If we don't have that endpoint of a baptized disciple fixed firmly in mind, we could end up stuck on side roads. For example, watch this video and see if you can identify the problem that our brother has.
You going out in field service after lunch? Yes, I'm gonna be there, but I've got one return visit that I gotta make. All right, see you then.
My neighbor lost his job after 20 years. And as a result, he's got to move out of his house, got to move into an apartment. I decided to go help him out a little bit to pack up, make it a little easier for him to make that move.
You know, won't it be nice a time period where we don't have to worry about economic troubles like that?
Yeah, it will. You know, that's why I'm so happy that my grandchildren chose to go for higher education. They both landed good jobs.
People don't talk that way.
They do.
My grandchildren chose to go for higher education.
No, they do, and I can like relate to being on a return visit like this because you're trying to lead them down the road of what your agenda is for, you know, being there, and they're talking about real life. They're talking about real actual things.
You've already got them fooled into thinking you care about them.
That's the point.
That you're their friend and that you're actually there to see them.
That's the point, and that's what bugged me about this particular clip, because the guy is there, he has an agenda, he just wants to start a Bible study, or he wants to get the guy to come to meetings, or whatever it is, you know, ultimately their goal is to get people baptized. But he doesn't really care about the man. He doesn't genuinely care about him, because all he wants is to get him to agree to this one type of one thought. And the man is just talking about his real life.
Yeah. And that goes back to some of the things we've spoken about in our past videos about why Jehovah's Witnesses maybe aren't the best friends to have, or why when you're in school you never make a lot of real friendship contacts, because you're always taught that you should be witnessing to these people, and that's like your primary goal, that you have a unique opportunity, a unique territory to witness to everyone, and that's your primary goal. So you just see that go on throughout the entire life of a Jehovah's Witness, as from school age to being able to set an example or provide a witness to your classmates all the way through school. And this guy looks like a college age young guy, clearly just maybe pioneering or whatever, but again, still, that's all you see people as a number. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but you see them as a baptism or a notch on your belt. That doesn't seem right too, because I think a lot of people earnestly want to save lives when
you
they're
see them
on
as
service.
a worldly person.
Yeah.
You see them as a worldly person that is you know, doesn't have the truth and has worldly thinking, and that you have to correct their thinking by getting them to, you know, believe as you do.
Mm-hmm.
Let's watch the rest.
Bridge that you cross when you come here, you've noticed that they're starting to do some work on it. And that's pretty extensive work. They're going to replace that whole bridge. So according to the newspaper article, it's going to be like a 6 to 8 month project.
Wow, that is a long time. You know, Chris, the reason why I came by is I wanted to show you this magazine.
I love these. These are so well written.
Isaiah 48:17 is a key scripture here. Notice what it says. I, Jehovah, am your God, the one teaching you to benefit yourself.
He's so dismissive of the man. The man's talking about, you know, what's going on in the world, what's going on in their community, and he is so bored.
He's like,
He doesn't care about the man. And I have a point to make, but I just want to get through this clip.
That's familiar. I think your dad read that to me once or twice. How's your dad doing anyway?
Doing good. You know, they said they've got more Bible studies than they can even cover in 1 week.
Well. You know, I can remember when you and your dad came here. You were a little kid about this high. And you just stayed right by his side. And your dad was so proud.
You know, Chris, I know my dad had offered to study the Bible with you in the past.
John, to be honest, I'm too old to change. Set in my ways now. I think that God's just going to have to take me the way I am. More chocolate?
Yeah, don't mind.
I don't know that anybody would say that, but my point is, so I was having a conversation with someone recently that they said that they had a friend, that they worked with a Jehovah's Witness, that they had a friend that was a Jehovah's Witness. And I said, correction, you had an acquaintance that was a Jehovah's Witness that you thought was a friend, but they only saw you as their worldly workmate. And she thought about that for a second, and she was like, huh. And she realized that it was true. I said, how much time did you spend with this person outside of work? Did they ever socialize? Did you ever talk on the phone? Did you ever have any other dealings? You thought you were friends because you would talk about life and things that were important to you at work? Nope. And I said, because a Jehovah's Witness will not have a friend who is worldly. You are a potential Bible study for them. So it's just a way of dehumanizing people, of not seeing their humanity and thinking that any problems that they have would be solved if they became a Jehovah's Witness and were applying Bible principles. Well, how many Jehovah's Witnesses do you know that are genuinely happy? I didn't know any.
No, everybody's facing a lot of the same problems.
Yeah.
The pressures and stresses of being a Jehovah's Witness, of all these expectations put on you.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I thought was interesting about this clip is this older gentleman basically says to this guy, John, I'm set in my ways. I'm too old to change. God's going to have to take me as I am. How many... Do you think there's any Jehovah's Witness, a devout Jehovah's Witness that's older, that you could change their mind by talking to them? They're the same exact way. And this is not just worldly people. This is religious people. People who are raised to believe a certain way or have come to believe a certain way. You're not going to change their mind if they're devout, if they attribute all of the good things in their life to this religion. And it could be any religion, because every religion does the same thing. You could be a Mormon, you could be Catholic, you could be any kind of Protestant denomination. It doesn't matter. If you are a faithful person, and like so many athletes, which bugs me, man. You go win a sports event and they praise Jesus. It's that kind of devout faith. You can't change that person's mind, regardless of what faith they are. And that's the same for Jehovah's Witness. No other Christian is going to knock on your door. And by the way, I have some, just to kind of show some of the other Jehovah's Witnesses too, because I talk to people who pass out tracts, Bible tracts, and I've kept them because Jehovah's Witnesses are not the only religion who goes in door-to-door ministry. I've talked to people in parking lots at the grocery store. People invite me to their church. So Jehovah's Witnesses, they believe that they are the only ones accomplishing this ministry, but they're not. They're absolutely not. And I don't know, I guarantee if another person from one of these Christian churches around or Christian organizations around knocks on your door as a Jehovah's Witness, are you going to take their literature? Are you going to talk to them? So why would you think anyone on the other side of a door would talk to you? You are absolutely unwilling to do what you're asking someone else to do. Mm-hmm. It's actually kind of preposterous. If you were to sit down and put yourself in the other person's position, you are told by the organization not to listen to other people, not to take other people's literature, don't go to other websites, and yet you don't think that another church is saying don't listen to Jehovah's Witnesses? I mean, that's possible too. But either way, people are diehard in their faith, and they believe what they believe. So what you're asking people to do at the door it's a stretch, especially when you have no proof to back it up.
That's a really good point, though, that got me thinking about how people who are very religious or are believers. And I'll take my grandparents, for instance, who were Southern Baptist, and they had their faith. They felt saved, and they had their own relationship with a higher power. They kept most of that to themselves because it was a personal relationship, but they really believed in the Bible. They believed in Jesus, and just because they didn't go, trying to convert everybody they met, and they kept that to themselves, they still had that foundational belief. And when you think about what this guy says about I'm too old to change, and what you were saying, that people get, they believe what they believe. They believe, that they've been helped through bad situations in their life because of their faith. They feel like it has made them strong, and that they have a personal relationship with Jesus, or some other higher power, whatever they want to call it. And, when you talk to Jehovah's Witnesses who have been in it for a really long time, one of the things that they will say to you is, well, where am I going to go? They've been doing this for so long. They've staked their entire life on it. And they've said, well, where are we going to go away to?
Well, that sounds... I just watched The Shawshank Redemption again the other day, and that sounds like what the old man said that when he got out of prison. What am I going to do now?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was institutionalized. And as a Jehovah's Witness, you become institutionalized with that mindset. Not to mention, everybody from the platform and the magazine says there's nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing good out there. So when you're given all that information for your whole life, or for years and years and decades, and this is information coming from people you trust, it's indoctrination. It's more than just a belief. It's like a palatable, tangible belief. You're scared. It's fear-based.
Right.
And just going back 1 second with this guy that John is calling on, people that we meet and people that I've met, when I was Jehovah's Witness, you talk to them about the Bible, they have, in a lot of cases, my friend, one of my friends, for example, was Catholic, and his family's Catholic, Italian Catholic. Even if he found out the Catholic Church was wrong and he believed it, he would never stop being a Catholic because it would break his mom's heart. And so for witnesses to feel like everyone else's religious choice is just based on a whim, or it's willy-nilly, and maybe you're proud you're a 3rd or 4th generation Jehovah's Witness. Man, we got families that are 10th generation Roman Catholic or whatever, that they consider their religion as part of their family heritage. And people feel those pressures, worldly people feel those religious pressures from their families also. Like, how could you leave Jesus by leaving the Catholic Church to become what? A Jehovah's Witness, that cult? People have those strong feelings also. It's not just pressure from Jehovah's Witnesses trying, it's not just pressure being a Jehovah's Witness. All religious people, if they're devout, feel these pressures to be a part of their organization and to maintain that status quo.
I mean, that's why the majority, I would say, of people who have doubts as Jehovah's Witnesses, such as me, I stayed in much longer than I would have liked to, because I didn't want to break my parents' heart.
Yep.
I didn't want to hurt them. But I knew for a long time that I didn't believe in what they were teaching. But eventually the pain of staying in became too great compared to the pain of leaving and what I would lose.
Right, and I guarantee there's somebody that's watching this video right now who is still tied to the organization in some way because they don't want to break their parents' heart. They don't want to break their brothers and sisters' hearts. They don't want to break somebody's heart. And I get that, but at some point, you're only hurting yourself because you're doing something you don't believe for, maybe for a noble reason, but maybe the onus isn't on you. Maybe the onus should be on the other people to accept you for who you are and what you believe and what you like and what you don't like, and accept you for the real person that you are. When you stop having to, what's the right word? Like act,
Pretend.
pretend. Yes, thank you. When you stop having to pretend to be a certain way and you can just be yourself, I think everyone is happier in that instance. I know that's, in my experience, that's the case. So it's just getting past all of that kind of stuff,
It is. I want to come back to that, but I want to come back to that at the end of our video because I have some thoughts about what we were just talking about. But we're sort of getting off track, and the main point of what I want to talk about is coming up in this JW broadcasting. So let's play that clip.
Bum, bum, bum.
Could you identify with the brother in that video? Have you ever had a return visit with someone who just loves your company? Perhaps you've been leaving literature with that person for months, even years, and yet the person has no genuine interest in progressing.
I just want to say something about that, about the person is not progressing.
According to whose standards?
The person doesn't know there's a time schedule.
No.
They don't know they're supposed to be progressing because the Jehovah's Witness doesn't come out and say that. It's never directly said that, at least not in my experience in going out in field service, that when you get somebody who's interested, they allow you to have a Bible study. On the first Bible study, you don't say, I'm expecting to get through this book in 6 months, and in another 6 months we're going to get through the second book, and then I'm expecting you to get baptized. People don't know that going in. Like, a lot of them may think, this is cool, I like the Bible, I think the Bible is interesting, this person seems to want to teach me about the Bible, and they're going to do it for free, what have I got to lose? They don't know there's a schedule they got to stick to, and that there's demands being implied on them already.
Right. Because they don't know what your hidden agenda is.
Because you don't tell them.
What about a person you've been studying with for years, but the person isn't making changes, hasn't stopped going to church, and shows no real interest in attending Christian meetings? Some people are glad to study the Bible with us simply for the fact that they value Bible education. And we love to teach people about the Bible.
What are the qualifications of a Jehovah's Witness to provide Bible education? How much do Jehovah's Witnesses really know about the Bible? Like, what the New World Translation says, but do you know how the New World Translation got to be the New World Translation?
No, they do not.
And the history of the manuscripts that were used to write it and where they came from? No. So it's a facade. It's all a facade.
But we have to remember that providing Bible education for its own sake is not our primary goal. In fact, it could be a side road. The fact is, some people who value Bible education are not interested in becoming baptized disciples of Jesus. The world's full of Bible scholars who are highly educated in the Bible, but who do not become disciples of Christ Jesus. For example, one Bible scholar was educated at a Bible institute, a religious college, and a theological seminary. He holds a doctorate in religious studies. He has a thorough knowledge of biblical Greek, and he's written 30 books about the Bible. Yet he describes himself as an agnostic atheist. So Just providing Bible education is not our primary goal.
And he also teaches at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
And his name is Bart Ehrman. They don't want you to know who this person is. Maybe they think you might already know, but probably you don't. And the reason is they don't want you reading his literature. Mm-hmm. And I will say, when I heard this, it just frustrated me because they're really putting him down. And the thing is, what they're not saying is that he started as a fundamentalist evangelical Christian. Mm-hmm. He believed that the Bible was the inerrant Word of God, and he wanted to be a pastor, so he went to college. He went to seminary. He went to Bible theological, whatever it is, all these different, and he learned ancient Greek, and he can read and translate ancient manuscripts. And it was through this education, through him learning truth, that he woke up.
Yeah, and I was actually just listening to one of his speeches the other day, and in part of it, it's like he is the guy that gets the phone call when a new artifact is discovered and they need it translated. He's the guy. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is a person who's truly an expert in his field. Either way, I was just saying that this is the guy who gets the phone calls to look at ancient artifacts when they're discovered, to translate the language, to make sure that things are done right. Mm-hmm. He's truly an expert in his field.
An expert.
An expert that the experts go to. Mm-hmm. Not to mention, his book Misquoting Jesus was in the top 10 on the New York Times bestseller list.
A lot of his books.
But that was one of the more famous, more talked about ones. He did talk show circuits and stuff, and a lot of debates. He's done, if you just go to YouTube and look at Bart Ehrman, and just listen to some of his speeches. He's also done debates as a biblical scholar, which are very interesting to listen to. Knowing about the Bible and knowing the history of the Bible, I think, is the primary thing that will make a person not believe in the Bible.
I read his book, Misquoting Jesus. I'm not sure if I had stopped altogether going to meetings when I read that book, but I remember when I was reading it, I had the feeling that this was the first time I felt like I started to really understand the Bible. And everything started to make sense about the Bible. All the things that you couldn't really understand, and you're told, oh, well, you just have to have faith, or that you just lack faith, or you need to do more research. It was when I read his books, and coming from the position of a person who understands that probably a good majority of the people that were reading it did believe that the Bible was the inerrant Word of God, that it didn't contradict itself, and because he went through that whole process of having to finally realize and admit that the Bible did contradict itself, and why did it contradict itself, and who was it that was actually writing these books that came down to be part of the canon of the Bible. And so I definitely recommend his work to anybody, because it's very interesting, and you will start to understand the Bible in a way that you never did before.
Yeah, and I think one of the more interesting parts about that, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but it's not like there's ever been an old first version intact Bible found anywhere. There's every piece of everything we know about the Bible is from copies of copies of copies. There are almost no original texts anywhere. They don't exist. So when you start looking back at how was a book made? Well, there was no printing presses back then. So if you wanted a book, if you were rich enough to be able to afford a book, which at that time would have been one of the greatest luxuries on the planet, most people couldn't read or write, And you wouldn't be doing this yourself. You would hire a scribe to make a book for you, to copy a book for you. But that means they also had to have a copy to copy from. So it's a super rare thing. And so, and then, and Bart Ehrman actually said he does this in his college classes because the students didn't believe that there were mistakes in the Bible that came from copying. Mm-hmm. Like even little things like a punctuation in the wrong place, or an A instead of an and, or whatever. So he told them, if you don't think this is possible, go home and start making a copy of the Bible yourself. Start at Genesis 1:1. Boom, go for it. You make a copy. See how many pages you get in before you make one mistake. And it's true. So the idea that the Bible has, since its beginning, been this unerrant, unchanged Word of God, finger of God to the page, is just completely fantasy world. And the only reason the only way you can learn about this stuff is to step out from behind the veil of whatever religious organization that you're stuck behind and invest. Don't look at apostate material. Don't look at, and you just look at the Bible. Just the Bible. Research the Bible. Know that all of the stories that are written, all of the Gospels written hundreds of years later, Mark wasn't written by Mark, John wasn't written by John, Matthew wasn't written by Matthew. This is sloppy work. And so easily, the truth is so easily available. Yeah. Just do research on the Bible. That'll make you, well...
It'll wake you up.
Yeah.
But, so on top of them really insulting Bart Ehrman, the other part of that is that our primary goal, he says, is not to to educate people on the Bible. That's a secondary road. So what are their primary goal? Well, the primary goal is to get people baptized. Mm-hmm. And it's like, every time I hear them say things, it's just like, this is not the same religion that we grew up with. Because, we used to say this is a Bible educational work. We're trying to get people to read their Bible. Mm-hmm. And that's what you would say out in service. And you're offering a free home Bible study. So you're going into it with with a lie. You're going into it with a lie. Because that's not your primary reason for conducting a home Bible study. You're giving them a home Jehovah's Witness study to get them to be baptized. Mm-hmm. As a Jehovah's Witness. And it's kind of devious.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that, and we've known this forever, Jehovah's Witnesses never just study the Bible with the Bible. Mm-hmm. There's always Bible study aids, and those Bible study aids always have an agenda, because those are publications by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. So, and
that have an angle. It has their belief system.
Well, how many times have you been on a study or seen this or heard this or seen an example from the platform where you're studying your lesson, chapter 2 of whatever book, and then a person says, well, what about this? And what happens like when you die? And you're like, we'll get to that. We'll get to that later in the chapters. Let's just continue where we're at now. There's an agenda. There's like, what do you call it? A curriculum, mm-hmm. And you have to follow path A to path B to point C to whatever D to get the type of indoctrination that they want you to have. You have to accept A to believe B. Mm-hmm. You can't just go from A to D and expect somebody to swallow that if they don't already believe C. So I feel like, again, it's dishonesty, because when people want to have a talk about the Bible, and maybe they'll show you something in the Bible that doesn't agree with what the Jehovah's Witness religion teaches, then it's like, well, we don't want to argue. We're not here to argue with you. I'm like, I'm not arguing, we're just talking about the Bible. Why do you believe it this way when I believe it this way? Jehovah's Witnesses don't want to discuss these things. It's almost like they want you to accept, just boom, this is what
Accept
I'm
their
telling you.
version.
Accept it as the truth, just like I do, and then we can keep going.
And the problem with this, for if you're still watching and you're a Jehovah's Witness, the problem with this is that it is your version, and you believe with 100% absolute sincerity. I know that you're sincere when you believe that you have studied the Bible, but you've only studied it the way that it has been presented by Jehovah's Witnesses. You haven't studied it the way that someone like Bart Ehrman has studied it. You haven't studied it without an agenda. And I've said this before on this channel, and I'll say it again. That part of what woke me up is when I started reading the Bible for the second or third time, and I just decided I wasn't going to, try to get my 3 chapters a day so I could get it done in a year. I was taking it slow, and at the time I was only kind of researching, obviously, what had been produced by the Watchtower, but I started to read it in a way that just with an open mind, and like, what if I wasn't reading this as one of Jehovah's Witnesses? What would I think about these scriptures? And when I went through especially when I went through the New Testament, it really struck me that I was like, this is only written for the Christians who had a heavenly hope. There's nothing in here that would lead me to believe that there was any other hope. Because when Jesus talked about, and I have sheep who are, I have other sheep, he was not talking about a different hope. He was talking about going out into the non-Jewish community. He was talking about preaching to Gentiles, that these were the other sheep that were not of the Jewish fold. And I really started to see that when I was reading it, that there was not this earthly hope being talked about in anything that Jesus said. That was something that they made up. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. My understanding is that the history of Jesus is based on a lot more than one Jesus. There's more Jesuses. And
there was the Jesus in the Bible.
Yeah, well.
That's what I was talking about. The Jesus, when I was reading the Bible, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. So. Yeah.
It's interesting. Especially the Gospels. Very interesting. But yeah, check out Bart Ehrman.
Yeah.
He's cool.
Anyway, so we learned something new. They don't care about educating people about the Bible. That's not important to them anymore. And there's good reason for that, because if people really start doing true Bible research, they're going to get a different picture of the Bible than what Jehovah's Witnesses present.
Yeah, and especially being raised as a Jehovah's Witness, we had never heard any other version of what the Bible teaches than the one that Jehovah's Witnesses present. Mm-hmm. But now, being away from that for more than a decade, it's really interesting to look back on what their belief system is now versus what it was when we were young and growing up. And it's different. It's definitely different.
It's definitely different.
A lot of things have changed. And I think that's interesting, because my understanding was that Jehovah God was unchanging. That his standards were always the same level of strictness. God's standards haven't changed. Mm-hmm. And yet the organization has changed so much. So if it's not God's standards that have changed, then men have changed God's organization for whatever reason.
Well, we were children of the 70s and 80s, and we were in the heyday of the organization when it had its biggest growth, and the generation of 1914 had not all passed away by that point. Yeah. So the belief that we were really in the last days was believable, because look, all of these, we felt like, 1914, the generation had not passed away yet. We're in the end of the end of the end. And it wasn't hard to believe. Of course, we were raised in it. But, I was talking recently to another young person who recently woke up, and they were, a generation younger than us. And they just can't even get over how much it's changed since the early 2000s when they were coming up in it.
Well, and when we were kids, a lot of the people who claimed to be of the anointed were still alive, and a lot of us had at least one in our congregation. So
They were all very old.
right. So when I'm
For the most part.
13, 14, 15 years old, it's in the late 80s. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the numbers at that time of the anointed were like
Dwindling.
9,000 and then 8,000 and then 7,000. And that's, they were, I don't know, 7,000, but I know it went down to like 8,000, and we had seen it drop. Like as we were kids, when we were in the organization, everything was kind of going according to plan. Like
Going according to plan.
So those of the anointed who were alive with the understanding of what happened in 1914 are dying off. And at least by the time they're all gone, or when they're mostly gone, is when the Great Tribulation will start. And at that time, there was no kind of clear answer about what would happen to the remaining few who were left on earth, if they would be caught away to heaven or if they would live out their earthly life here, like who knows. But that's what we were taught, and it kind of, you can understand how someone could believe that. But after 2014, when a person who was even born in that year would have to be 100 years old, I mean, that's why we saw that.
Well, that's the
new
problem. It hasn't gone according to plan. So they've had to come up with a new plan, and a new plan, and a new plan.
Yeah.
And it's going to continue like that forever because, despite what you may think, that there's a pandemic happening on the earth, this is a cyclical thing. Pandemics have always happened on earth, and thankfully we have the technology and the ability to communicate with the whole world in order to help slow it down. And I don't think that this is something to be afraid of. And I'm not going to say it bothers me, but it's one thing that I realize that with very indoctrinated Jehovah's Witnesses, because they live in a state of fear. They're always talking about things that create fearfulness within them. That they're going to think that this is a sign, that this is going to be the beginning of the Great Tribulation. Just like 9/11, people thought that was the beginning of the Great Tribulation. And I just don't see it that way.
But there's always been instances that I can remember growing up that got people speculating. 1986 declared the International Year of Peace.
All right.
That got people speculating. The ban on Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia, that has gotten people speculating about, oh man, is Babylon the Great really closing in on Jehovah's organization? Is something like this possible to happen in the United States? There was a lot of speculation about that kind of thing. So living in a way where you're always looking for the worst, you're going to find it. Living in that state of deluded panic, where you're always waiting for the next shoe to drop, where you're always expecting the end to come. That's not a good quality of, that's not a good way to live your life, And I see that in the number of people who have illnesses as Jehovah's Witnesses, the number of people who have fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome or other diseases that seem to be ones where they just wear the body out. where people are just straight worn out and depressed. And it's a common enough thing just with people that I've known that I would say that there's definitely a cause and effect there.
And I've heard 2 other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses say the same thing to me in conversation, that Jehovah's Witnesses seem to age worse than the rest of the world and have more diseases. I don't know, maybe, I don't know, it could be anecdotal, but it does seem to, if you're living in a state of fear, which is producing chemicals that are, like cortisol and those things that are aging to your body when they continue in a heightened state, and then you're not taking care of your body because, let's face it, most Jehovah's Witnesses are not that athletic. They do not put emphasis on health because this is, basically a waste of time. You should be out in the ministry. So they're not taking care of their health. Let's face it, a lot of them drink because that is an acceptable drug abuse within the organization. And there's many of them who are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. So you mix all of these elements together, and it's very unhealthy lifestyle for sure. But did you have anything more to say about that? I had something I wanted to just say at the end, but
I have something. I'm going to read that at the very, very end. Or I could read it now.
no, read it now.
Okay, so I just found a gem of something in an old publication, and I just want to read it to you guys to see if this comforts you in these last days. Okay, so I'll show you the book after. It says, however, because of the pressures that the world brings upon genuine Christians, it may not be easy to continue walking faithfully in the way of the truth. Jesus warned that true worshipers would be hated and persecuted just as he was. Circumstances may arise that threaten to interfere with your regular study of the Bible or your association with fellow Christians at congregational meetings. Opposition may cause the preaching work to become difficult, even dangerous. What will you do? The Bible counsels you have need of endurance in order that after you have done the will of God, you may receive the fulfillment of the promise. So the only right course is to press on courageously in God's service, trusting Him to sustain you. It sounds like that could have been written yesterday.
By jw.org.
Yep, but that is from the Truth Book from 1968. So
52 years ago.
this is written before I was born. And yet, the message of Jehovah's Witnesses has not changed. If you read this book, you believed that the end was coming in 1975, because that is what the Witnesses predominantly, again, it is in writing, it's in a 1968 Awake or Watchtower magazine, I have the bound volume, but that's one of those things that was a more implied belief. There were talks given about it.
It was a cultural belief.
Yeah, but either way, both of our parents grew up in that time, in the organization around that time. And this was the book they would have studied
Yep.
before they got baptized. So we can see that the message is exactly the same, just repackaged for a new generation. And that's what I wish the Jehovah's Witnesses who have been in the organization for a long time could just wake up and see.
And I have to, it makes me so sad when I look at that book, because I know that's the book that my parents studied before they were baptized. And for my parents, they believed that becoming Jehovah's Witnesses brought them a happy family life, that even if it wasn't the truth, that, and they did believe it was truth, but there was always the thinking, and I probably even heard this at some point, that even if it's not the truth, it's the best way of life, and it's led us to have a happy family life. And my family is completely divided now between us and some other family members who have woken up that we're being shunned, and that our family is torn apart. My aunt, who was never a witness, asked my mom over the summer if she could just forgive and we could be a family again, and no, that was not a possibility. And same thing with his family. His family is completely divided. He has a niece who's no longer a witness, and we got to spend time with her over the holidays. And her mother and her other sister don't talk to her. Her grandparents, Mike's parents, don't talk to her at all. And the family is just completely torn apart. He'll still talk, I'm saying I'm talking about Mike's dad, will still talk to his brothers and sisters who are not Jehovah's Witnesses. He'll still keep in touch with them, but he won't even talk to his own son. So the belief that, that is a dishonest belief that it brings families closer together, because it definitely does not do that. We are evidence of that. And for me, I still will say that if my family, anyone in my family comes to me, calls me, even stops by, which has happened, that if they want to talk to me, my door is open to them. And I can't say the same for them, because I know that many of them have never responded to a text or a phone call from me. So, I still hold hope that, that we can heal. But the message that I wanted to end this very long video apparently on is I was talking with someone the other day who had gone through their own waking up process last year, and it was very painful for them. And I kept telling them through it, it will get better. Right now, it seems like you're always going to be in this immense amount of pain. And I know what it feels like, because I went through that. And, even myself had suicidal thoughts, thinking about losing my family, and now I've lost my faith, and what do I believe? And it's a very challenging time. So if there's anybody who's watching this, who you are going through your own personal hell, basically, from waking up and the fear of what you're going to lose, and maybe you're feeling fearful because of what's happening in the world right now, and you're thinking, well, maybe that is the truth, maybe they do have the truth, and maybe I'm making a huge mistake, and maybe I should go back. And I'm just going to encourage you that there are many ex-Jehovah's Witness Facebook groups that you can join, and that you're not alone. And I can promise you, just like this other person I was just talking to the other day, who says they couldn't have imagined how happy they would be now. And I told them back then, you won't be able to imagine it, but eventually you're going to move past this, and you're going to find happiness, and you're going to find more happiness on the other side. And that's exactly what has happened. So, just hold out a little bit longer and just keep moving forward. Keep educating yourself, and find people that you can talk to, in some of these groups that you can become friends with. Like I became friends with Susan Gaskin, and we, we'll chat it up as regularly as we're able to. So I just wanted to end on a message of hope.
Yeah, and along with that, because people are kind of trapped inside, trapped with their phones and their social media, if you are lonely and you want to talk to somebody and reach out, like ex-JW, the ex-JW Facebook group, there's a bunch of groups on...
The one I recommend right now is the Shun podcast.
Yeah, okay.
Michael Shemwell does a wonderful job moderating that Facebook page, and he is a life coach now, and he's he's offering coaching services based on your income, and he's just a great, he and his wife Jenny, I just love them. They're all around great people.
Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of ex-JWs, and there's a lot of groups for people to talk and get together and socialize and organize, and there's groups on Reddit and there's groups on Facebook, and so it doesn't take much just to Google a group and just hop in. If you want to join anonymously, in a lot of instances you'll be able to do that. But just like Robin said, there's a lot of people out there who are willing to support you through this transitional time when you're not quite sure what the next step is. The other thing is too, there's a lot more now than even a year ago. So many more now on YouTube videos of people who are sharing their experiences of how they did it. How did I deal with my life and my job and my social life? And how did I make friends when I left the organization? And there's a lot of videos online too. So kind of expand your horizons and, reach out to people. You can reach out to us, there's a lot more people out there, and there's a much larger organized community out there than you would probably think, at least initially, But there's people out there that want to help, people who've been through the same kind of thing.
Yeah, you're not alone. And there's, thousands of people who have gone through what similar, if not very, very similar to what you're going through. So anyways, I just wanted to say that because, in these times, everybody needs a little bit of encouragement.
Yep. Yeah, and you deserve to be happy, regardless of what your situation is now. We all go through ups and downs, but we deserve to be happy. And if you're living in a way that hinders you being happy or prevents you from being happy, if you can identify that, maybe now is a time to sit back. You're not, you don't have to go to the meetings or field service maybe for a few weeks at least. Maybe think about that. Maybe sit down with a cup of coffee or tea and just reflect on what makes you happy in your life.
Zoe's happy. She's not in the frame right now. She's down here. She's moving around.
You can get up here real quick. Come on.
Yeah, Zoe's happy. She just got her spring shave yesterday.
Just got a haircut. So, but everybody deserves to be happy. So, pursue your own happiness. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, you're all good.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching, and until next time, whenever that may be. Bye.